What is up, Jamily? This is JamiroQuai Fan 2000 here with yet another episode, episode 4 of my revisitations of the Jamiroquai Discography. And of course, in this episode, I will be covering, of course, 1999 Synkronized, which came off of a monster album, and of course, in 1996-97 with Jamiroquai's third album, Traveling Without Moving. So the anticipation was literally at a fever pitch, even for the band when they were recording Synkronized. But Synkronized is a distinctive album in the Jamiroquai Discography for the simple fact it is the revolver of the Jamiroquai Discography. What I mean by that is, if you're familiar with the Beatles album Revolver from 1968 was one of the best, was an album that set an example of an album you can listen to from the beginning to end without any stopping or pausing or repeating or anything. And Synkronized is quite pretty much in that same vein. It was an it of course was the only Jamiroquai album of the discography, at least of the burgeoning into the new sound, that had the best music production and mixing of all the Jamiroquai albums that were been released over the last 27 years from the band. But as for the critical reaction and reception when Synkronized came out in 1999, it was kind of flat. A lot of the, at least the music reviewers, didn't really dig Synkronized, but us fans, we absolutely loved it because it had, like I said, the best production of all the Jamiroquai albums, at least in the beginning of the new sound era. But of course, Synkronized did have a few lingering troubles happening on the horizon for the band, at least not for the band and not for the music. Whereas Stuart Zender would ultimately end up leaving the band in this era, and Jamiroquai would end up having to scrap all the bass work that Stuart had contributed to this album, and end up bringing in another bassist to fill in all the gaps that they had left that they had to finish for Synkronized. And of course, this was around the time J.K. was starting to struggle with substance abuse problems, but luckily he had the forethought and had very, very strong friends in the band that would ultimately end up backing him up and would help him kick his habits. During some album sessions down in the Caribbean and other places around Europe, J.K. was starting to get into the drug abuse, but luckily he ended up cleaning himself up very, very quickly. But back to the album, I do like to give a little bit of history on each album in these revisitations. So if I seem to meander off in any of these little revisitations of these albums, I just like to set a little bit of extra context, for at least for the members of the Jamily who have not seen my videos here on YouTube before. I just like to give a little bit of little history footnotes here and there throughout my revisitations of each Jamiroquai album. But going back to Synchronize, the album itself, very, very amazing album, absolutely sparkling diamond of an album production-wise. And every song on the album has something to say and is absolutely immaculate in their own little in distinct ways. And listening to it now, I mean, you look at when Virtual Insanity came out in 1996 and how that just kick-started Traveling Without Moving with quite literally a nitrous oxide boost of nitro, and now you look at Synchronize, and it had the same situation. Canned Heat, which ended up being a monster single for Jamiroquai. Not to mention, it would end up later on re-emerging to kind of be the theme music for Generation Y with its introduction in the movie Napoleon Dynamite, which would end up being, with Jamiroquai's Canned Heat making another big blip in the pop mainstream due to that single being used predominantly in that movie with John Hader and from Jathura and Jared Hess. In Napoleon Dynamite, it would end up becoming a synonymous movie of that generation, and not to mention Canned Heat and No So Part really was the highlight of that film, and John Hader did an amazing dance performance in that film. If you've not seen Napoleon Dynamite, check out that movie when you can. But that was another example of the single re-emerging in an unlikely place from that album. But I still look at Syncronized as a very good transitional album. It's another, and this is not the only transitional album for Jamiroquai. There would be yet another transitional album coming up later on in discography for Jamiroquai. But you know, I love Syncronized. It's a gorgeous little album, and I do mean little album. It was 10 tracks long, 10 tracks strong, but still a great little album. But I hope you enjoyed this revisitation of Syncronized. I do in the next episode in this series, I will be, of course, covering the next album in the discography. I will be covering A Funk Odyssey, and this would definitely see Jamiroquai, JK, and the whole band just go into Futura Funk who tore up funk head first and yet again show another example of when Jamiroquai was ahead of the curve, and definitely creatively ahead of the curve of all the other bands that are out there in that time. So I hope you enjoy this video, and please be sure to, like I said in the last episode where I was talking about traveling without moving, please be sure to leave your thoughts of what you think of Synkronized and all the other respective Jamiroquai albums in their own little other episodes in the YouTube comments down below. I'm most interested in reading your feedback on what you think of each Jamiroquai album in the discography, years and literally decades on after having listened for so much time. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and definitely see you again really soon. And as always, this is Jamiro Fan 2000, and I'll see you again really soon with more Jamiroquai related videos here on the Jamiro Fan 2000 YouTube channel. Bye bye, everybody.